My name's Grace. I work for the School of Management in Marketing. And today we're going to have a session with Paolo Taticchi. And I will hand over to Paolo to introduce himself, and then we can get the ball rolling.
Thank you very much, Grace. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are today. I have prepared a presentation on a topic that I think is going to be interesting and hopefully it's going to trigger some questions, and we can have a small discussion at the end of my presentation. But I want to start by introducing myself. As you probably realized from the first 30 seconds, I'm Italian, but I've been in London for 10 years now, and I am a professor here at the School of Management of UCL. The School of Management is a part of the Faculty of Engineering. My area of expertise is business strategy and corporate sustainability. And in the school, I'm also a deputy director in charge for our MBA programs, executive education activities, and international activities. I am very active in research, very active in teaching, very active in projects with business. You can find a lot of information on my work on my personal website. If you are curious, feel free to look at some of my projects. In terms of my background, I studied mechanical engineering for 5 years. After 5 years, it became very clear to me that I didn't want to become an engineer. I wanted a career in business, and that's when I decided to study an MBA. I decided to study a PhD in operations management, and then over the years, my interest from operations kind of evolved in the direction of strategy and sustainability, which is what I do today. Before UCL, I worked in other top universities, both in the UK as well as in the US and Italy. Something unique about, I guess, my background is that I, on the top of my academic experience, I have developed a lot of practical experience in industry. So I started a number of businesses myself. Actually, some of them had a focus or have a focus on sustainability. And also today I am very active in advising organizations of different kind in different sectors in different countries on the topic of sustainability and how the development of sustainable business models can help them to become a more competitive organizations, which is really, to me, what is really interesting about sustainability. That is something that can truly impact on the competitiveness of a company. Today, I'm also an advisor to the Italian Ministry for Ecological Transition in Italy. So I'm also involved in policy problems related to sustainability. Over the years, I developed a very international teaching experience. I regularly teaching many business schools in different countries, which is very interesting if you teach sustainability, because of course discussing the sustainability in India is completely different from discussing the sustainability in the States or in South Africa. So you really need to basically apply the concepts to the context where you operate. Some of the topics that I'm going to cover in my presentation today are part of my research, and I published a book a year ago titled "The Corporate Sustainability in Practice," where I substantially made the two contributions with this book. On one side, I provided a new definition of corporate sustainability that I'm going to share with you, but also in this book, I was emphasizing the strategic value of sustainability in the context of a business strategy, and the importance of integrating the corporate sustainability initiatives in the context of core business activities. That again is a topic I'm touching in this presentation for you. I'm mentioning my research because UCL is a top university. We basically produce high quality research, world-leading research, and this research is actually used in our classes. So when you study a program at UCL, doesn't matter what you study, you're going to have professors leveraging their research into their educational activities and teaching enough in order to offer you the latest thinking on a certain topic. So that is, something we are very passionate about. I also wanted to say that today this topic of sustainability is not just a topic for big corporations. It's not a topic only for traditional organizations in traditional sectors. Sustainability today is really impacting any kind of business. And I wanted to share a couple of interesting, what I call fun projects that I recently developed that I think demonstrate how important this topic is becoming everywhere. So one example is the Italian Premier League. I've been recently involved in training top executives of the Italian Premier League teams. And the reason is that the UEFA Championship has mandated all of the teams of all the UEFA leagues to basically introduce a new role in the business organizations, which is called the sustainability manager. And the idea is to try to assess the positive and negative impacts of basically of the activities that are characteristic of a soccer team. So from running events to running a stadium or basically developing young football players. So it was a very interesting experience. It's sustainability in sports is becoming a very big deal, and you're going to see a lot of changes in the years coming. New strategies developed by soccer team organizations that are going to integrate sustainability thinking as part of their work. Another interesting project that became public last February was, for example, looking at the sustainability of motorsport championships. So together with a consulting firm, we developed a methodology to assess the sustainability of motorsport championships, and we produced a sustainability rankings. So again, another example of how sustainability is impacting a very particular sector. So this is to say that what I'm going to cover today with this presentation, it's not something that is important or valid or applies only to banks or manufacturing organizations. The concepts I'm going to share really apply virtually to any kind of a for-profit organization in the world, but also these principles, I guess, are relevant also for not-for-profit organizations. So I think it's important for you to develop an understanding today of what sustainability in the context of business means. So how can you define the corporate sustainability? And actually, there are a lot of definitions out there, but what I wanted to remark today is that the way organizations look at sustainability and the way academics look at sustainability has evolved significantly in the last 70 years. To understand, what sustainability in business is today, we really need to look at the evolution of the concept over time. And I guess first it's important to say that when we look at sustainability in business, we look at the role of organizations in the context of a sustainable development of society. So on this slide, there is a definition that I bet is familiar to you, because today is a definition studied at school of any level in kind of every country. And basically this definition is kind of pointing to this idea of the need that we have in society to preserve the planet and the need to basically protect quality of life in the planet. So we discuss a sustainable development of society because unfortunately in the last 2 centuries we have not been able to really develop in a sustainable way. So the way we developed until now has triggered a lot of big problems, big challenges that today we face as a society that we need to address. And it's impossible for governments to address these challenges alone. Business plays a major role in the context of a sustainable development of society. And that's why today we want business on board with this agenda, because they are part of the problem, but at the same time, part of the solution. So when I speak about challenges, I guess there are many, but a good summary is presented on this slide. And again, I'm pretty sure that this framework is familiar to many of you, because this is the well-known framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is an agenda that was defined by United Nations in 2015, setting goals for 2030 and identifying 16 major challenges that we need to address as a society. As you can observe from the slide, the objectives are 17 and not 16. So we have 16 challenges, but 17 objectives. The reason being that it became clear that these problems are so big that we really need collaboration among the different type of organizations, government working with large corporations, working with startups, working with not-for-profit organizations, in order to address these big problems that we face as a society, as for example, climate change. So an additional objective was identified, objective number 17, which is all about building the right partnerships in order to basically deliver on this agenda. This is an interesting framework, because today is also used by corporations to reflect on their negative or positive impacts. So this is a framework for government, but is also a framework for business. Okay, so keep this perspective in mind, because when in the next slides I'm going to speak about corporate sustainability, first and foremost, I'm referring to the role of organizations in the context of a sustainable development of society. And organizations can really play an important role because, as I said, they are part of the problem and therefore can be part of the solution. Now, today, I guess sustainability is a very popular topic. Is described by many as the fashion of the moment. And the reality is that sustainability is not a new topic. This, concept, this topic of sustainability in business has been around for more than 70 years. A lot of academics refer to this book that was published in 1953 by an American Nobel Prize winner as the first book that truly introduced this concept of corporate sustainability or social responsibility. And this was a very important book because some of the concepts that were introduced 70 years ago with this book are still relevant today. In particular, this idea that organizations do not only respond to shareholders, but they should be responsible towards a plurality of stakeholders. And this idea that sustainability is not a marketing topic or a communication topic. It is meant to be integrated into processes of strategic planning, and that therefore should basically be at the core of decision making and should impact the way we take decisions in business. So this is basically how this topic of sustainability, I guess, started 70 years ago. And then in the 70s, this topic became widespread. With a lot of contributions from different academics around the world. This framework that you see on this slide called the carrots pyramid became quite popular and basically became adopted as a framework by many organizations. And basically, this framework suggests that organizations have got responsibilities at different levels. For-profit organizations are expected to be profitable, and therefore they do have, there are economic responsibilities, a responsibility towards shareholders, but then there are legal responsibilities in a business. You want organizations to obey the law. There are ethical responsibilities. This means you expect managers and entrepreneurs not only to respect the law, but actually do what is right. And at times what is right could be different from the existing legislation in a certain country. And then this framework was introducing a fourth responsibility identified as a philanthropic responsibility, which was basically this idea of giving back. So the recognition that organizations with their activities, they might have negative impacts on the planet, for example, because of waste or because of energy consumption, because of impact on landscapes, or, for example, negative impacts on the local communities where they operate with their operations. And that basically this framework was suggesting organizations to take responsibility for that, and was suggesting a philanthropic approach, meaning that profitable organizations should have basically supported projects of a positive impact. This means use part of their profit to finance projects of positive impact in order to compensate for the negative impacts of their operations. So it was this idea substantially of offsetting negative impacts with projects that could have created a positive impact on society, or positive for a sustainable development of society. So just to give you an example, in my region, in my kind of hometown city in Italy, in the center of Italy, there is a very big cement business. And of course, cement businesses, they do have a real impact on the planet and on communities because of caves, because of energy consumption, because of pollution. So they are, quite problematic, businesses. And when I look at, for example, the type of sustainability initiatives that this big organization in my region was developing in the 80s and 90s, the early 2000s, they were involved in initiatives with a focus, for example, on planting trees, or they were financing the establishment of elementary schools in developing countries. So they were developing initiatives of positive impact in order to offset somehow their negative impacts, the negative impacts of the business. Now, while these, CSR initiatives, these positive projects are kind of good by definition, they don't necessarily, push organizations to change their business behavior. This means that you might have a very profitable organizations that basically give back by supporting these type of projects, but they keep the negative impacts, and that doesn't work in the long term. We want organizations to minimize as much as possible their negative impacts on the planet, on local communities, and that basically calls for innovating the way they operate, innovating their business models, developing new strategies in general. In the 90s, that's when basically things start changing. So first of all, there is a new concept that becomes very popular, and this is the concept of the triple bottom line that you might, for example, read in newspapers and news because it's today common language and used a lot by journalists and business experts. And basically, this concept of the triple bottom line is referring to this idea that companies should manage three things at the same time. They should manage their economic performance, but at the same time, they should manage in a proactive way their environmental performance and social performance. So it's not only about making money. It's not only about generating revenue. It's not only about growth. There is more than that. You want entrepreneurs and managers to look at the impact of business activities and manage these impacts in a proactive way. And as I said, you want to, on one side, minimize the negative impacts, but also you want to develop business activities in a way that you can contribute to a positive impact and therefore contribute to a positive, to a sustainable development of society. In terms of events that have made history and have changed the way we look at sustainability business, there is a corporate scandal in the 90s that really changed a lot of perspectives, and I'm referring to the scandal that Nike faced in 1996. It was a big scandal. It was associated to this picture that you see on this slide being published in an American magazine, and this was basically showing a very clear situation of child labor in the supply chain of Nike. And basically, this problem in the supply chain became a massive problem for Nike as a corporation. So this wasn't, something directly controlled by Nike. Nike had, contracts in Southeast Asia with very big organizations, very big suppliers. These basically suppliers decided to outsource illegally. to smaller organizations. And at a certain point, there was a new supply chain, a black supply chain established that was producing manufacturing products for Nike, and everything was illegal and was involving child labor. So this wasn't something, by design. This wasn't something, directly controlled by Nike. But at the same time, Nike was identified as responsible and accountable for this situation. So for the first time ever, movements against the brand of Nike began, and because Nike is a public company, the value of the shares collapsed for more than a year. And you read in the book of the founder of Nike that this was a really tough situation for the management team. For the first time ever, and only time, Nike faced bankruptcy because of a sustainability problem. And this was, I guess, a very big wake-up call at the time for many organizations, because managers and entrepreneurs realized that sustainability problems can have a very direct impact on brand reputation. And in the moment you have a reputational problem, you also face, soon after, a financial problem. And this is basically when, I guess, business people and academics started looking at sustainability in a different way, realizing that sustainability is a key for success in business, is a key for survival. And sustainability is not a marketing or communication topic. It's not about giving back, so it's not a philanthropic topic. Sustainability is about the way you do business that should be a responsible way. And if you're a responsible organization and you have stronger and better processes, at that point you are a high-performing organization. So there is a direct connection between this topic of sustainability and competitiveness. In the last 20 years, this topic of sustainability has evolved massively. We have seen the financial community taking a strong position, and today you have thousands and thousands of investors around the world that use what are called the ESG criteria, environmental, social, and governance criteria, as part of their decision-making processes. This is a big incentive for large corporations to develop a more sustainable business models, because if they want to attract these capitals, they need to be able to demonstrate a solid business, a sustainable business. New concepts have been introduced. A popular one from Harvard Business School, and is the concept of creating shared value. So this idea that organizations should not only need to create the value for shareholders, but they should create the value for society as well. And there is a lot of research suggesting that organizations that are able to create economic value jointly with societal value, they basically perform better in industry. So this is kind of driving a lot of business model change these days. There is also, I guess, there are new concepts that refer to the elaborate on the role of a business in society. And this concept of purpose is something that has been, I guess, mentioned by many senior leaders in industry. This idea that corporations should have a clear purpose, and again should contribute to a sustainable development of society with their business activities. Here on this slide, you have the picture of Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment organization in the world. They manage more than 10 trillion US dollars. And in a letter to global CEOs in 2018 that made the news worldwide, Larry Fink was basically telling his peers that sustainability is a big deal, that they were going to stop investments on organizations that were not taking sustainability seriously, and they were going to introduce ESG criteria in their investment processes in order to reward sustainable organizations. So again, pressure and pressure coming from the financial community, but this idea of the purpose as something that can really drive the mission of an organization. So in the book I published last year, I kind of realized that there was an opportunity for a new definition. So I reached out to colleagues in academia, I reached out to colleagues in industry, and I asked all of these kind of contacts to define the corporate sustainability for me. And this was a very interesting engagement exercise that led to this definition that you see on the screen, that basically suggests that modern corporate sustainability is an integral approach to business aimed at enhancing competitive positioning and profitability through the creation of shared value and the co-creation of projects, initiatives, and practices with a plurality of stakeholders, and the integration of environmental, social, and governance factors in decision making. And this is, I believe, a good definition reflecting the strategic value of sustainability in business today. Now, in this definition, I point the attention to this aspect of competitiveness. So the reason why organizations are successful in specific markets, in specific sectors, is always explained by a number of factors. So when we look at, for example, the success of Apple computers in the mobile phone sector, that success is not just explained by their ability to manufacture an incredible phone, or, for example, by their talent in marketing, or by an efficient supply chain. Very often is a combination of factors, is a combination of drivers that do contribute and explain the performance of an organization. So the point I'm trying to build today, also through my research, is that sustainability is today one of these drivers, and sustainability can explain and can impact significantly on the competitiveness of an organization. Now, it is my experience that very often companies, especially large companies, struggle to recognize new drivers of competition. And my favorite example to make this point is Nokia in the mobile phone market. So this is a cover page from Forbes. This is 2007, so about 15 years ago. And in 2007, Forbes was celebrating Nokia achieving the milestone of 1 billion customers. That's basically 1 out of 7 people in this planet. So back then, Nokia was absolutely by far the market leader, and nobody could see this changing. And in fact, as you can see, the subtitle was "Can anyone catch the cell phone king?" And today, when I am speaking, to a real audience, and I ask how many of you have got the Nokia in your pocket, typically is less than 1-2% of the audience owning a Nokia today. Why? Because basically Nokia completely disappeared from that market around 2010. When Apple arrived with new technologies, with new concepts, with new business models, and that basically impacted massively the business of Nokia. So this is basically interesting to say that at times, large organizations, successful organizations like Nokia 2007, do struggle to recognize new drivers of competition. And that, of course, is a very risky situation. And I believe that this is happening with this topic of sustainability. There are large and small organizations that struggle to understand first what sustainability, what modern corporate sustainability means. They struggle to understand how they need to change and what is the business case for change. And I keep repeating everywhere I go, everywhere I speak, that in this decade, we are going to see a number of large corporations that are going to go bankrupt as a consequence of getting sustainable transformation wrong. So I strongly believe is a very important topic for business. Just a couple of additional facts and stats maybe for you before taking the questions. But basically, I kind of wanted to elaborate a little bit on the business case for making the sustainable investments, the business case for change in industry, and why companies should have a sense of urgency. And here I basically put together on this slide a number of insights extrapolated from recent reports from consulting companies. And if you basically start reading these insights, you realize that sustainability is becoming a very hot topic in every industry. So you have entrepreneurs, CEOs that they do recognize today's sustainability as a driver of competition. You have organizations, governments pushing companies to report on their sustainability performance. You have investors that today use sustainability criteria as part of their investment processes. And this is not anymore a myth, it's actually a reality. There is a clear link between sustainability and innovation. And a very interesting study that was published 2 years ago during the pandemic from a very important institution that basically suggested that today 40% of the good reputation of an organization is explained by their sustainability performance, and that's basically massive. And then you have new generations that value sustainability, that buy products and services that taking into account the sustainability of these products and services, and that therefore triggering very important shifts in different type of markets. So basically, industry is definitely changing as a consequence of sustainability, as a consequence of a need for sustainability. There is today evidence from research that there is a positive correlation between the sustainability performance of organizations and the financial performance of organizations. So organizations that today are successful, organizations that perform, are leaders in different industries, are leaders from a financial perspective, very often are very sustainable organizations, because at the end, sustainability is about smart business. It's about building solid organizations that are very efficient, that are very responsible, that are able to manage risks associated to sustainability, and are able to create the value not only for shareholders, as I said before, but for a plurality of stakeholders. So this is basically rewarded by the market, and these are the type of organizations outperform financially competitors. There is a lot of research that tries to quantify or identify the key benefits associated to corporate sustainability strategies. And I guess key benefits are well summarized on this slide. There is a reputational value. There is the opportunity to improve revenue. There is the opportunity to better mitigate risks, and there is an opportunity to become more efficient and reduce costs. So all of these four things are, of course, very, very strategic topics for organizations and therefore important to them. So a final comment with a focus on time. Today, engaging with change is not enough. We need organizations to really embrace sustainable transformation quickly. So, of course, not engaging with sustainable transformation would be a suicide for organizations. So I don't believe that is an option at all. The question is, how aggressive strategies of change, strategies of transformation should be. And many studies have described this decade as the decade for action. So it's kind of really a relatively short amount of time that companies have got to evolve their business models and the way they operate. My vision is that companies that are gonna be able to engage with this type of transformation quickly and in the right way, not only they're gonna survive, but they are also gonna become more competitive. So they're gonna develop a competitive advantage in the industries where they operate. I strongly believe that late transformers will face a competitive disadvantage. This means they're going to really pay the bill of a late transformation. When you look at basically this slide, you can understand why this topic of sustainability is a strategy topic. You can probably understand why I am kind of looking into this topic of sustainability, being a strategy professor, and the type of importance that this topic has got in industry today. So hopefully this was a quick, but I hope interesting and kind of comprehensive introduction to this topic of sustainability industry and the strategic value of sustainability in industry. As we have 10 minutes left, I'll be very happy to take a few questions or comments in case there are any.
Perfect. Thank you, Paolo. I just wanted to remind people you can pop your questions in the Q&A. So please feel free to do that or raise your hand in case any of you missed that as you came in. But yeah, that was a really interesting talk. And we had a couple of questions sent in. A few people couldn't make it. So There are no silly questions, by the way. Just put it in the chat and we will answer it. Don't worry. You can say whatever you have on your mind and I'm sure we can answer. But one question someone did send in, Paolo, was in terms of like tracking it as a consumer. So how are you able to know a company that you're engaging with, how sustainable it is? And I suppose if I think about that now from what you said about the Nike scandal, people didn't know, Nike didn't even know that. So how do we know?
Yeah. I think that's a very good question. I believe today we don't have probably all of the tools to be able to assess or recognize a sustainable organization from another one. But I guess there is more and more happening that is going in this direction. So, of course, when you look at, for example, shopping food in a supermarket, you don't want to, you can't, expect an average, citizen to spend minutes to read the labels of the product and to be able to assess if that product or that organization is sustainable or not. You basically need something that is going to communicate very quickly that type of information. So new green labels or sustainability labels. There is an interesting one that is emerging and is the B Corp logo. The B Corp logo is associated to the B Corp movement. And this is basically a movement that started in the States and became a global movement of organizations that commit to sustainability, commit to basically generate the value for society, commit to responsible behavior. They go through a very tough, solid assessment. So it's not easy to become a B Corp. And what is also interesting is that as part of that process, organizations have to change their incorporation articles to make explicit that managers and shareholders make a commitment to basically run a responsible business. So this becomes also a legal matter for them. What is interesting is that today you have, I believe, more than 5,000 corporations, small and large, that have embraced this movement. And today, this B Corp logo is something that you can find in, for example, visible in retail stores. And actually, there are some interesting experiments that are happening at the time we are speaking. So I'm going to give you two examples in the retail world. Here in London, if you go if you visit Marks and Spencer or a WH Smith store, you are going to find basically section of the store that are dedicated to B Corp products. And this means that you are in an area of the store where you can trust the organizations that have produced these products. So I think this is gonna really help customers, citizens in the future to recognize the good businesses from the wrong businesses, and the good products from the bad products. The B Corp movement is relatively new. So I believe it's hard to say if this is the solution or is something that is emerging and has got potential. But I think what is happening is that now we are aware of this need and that there are solutions emerging. So hopefully in 2-3 years' time, I'm going to be able to give you a more solid answer to your question.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. That kind of sounds a little bit in the essence of like organic stickers that when that movement first started on food, that was going to be easily identifiable eventually, which would be great. We've had a couple of questions about the Formula One instances. So somebody's asked, regarding the Formula One case, are they moving quickly enough to become sustainable? And actually, will it ever become sustainable? Because on the one hand, they continue to race in countries
Yeah.
that have got human rights issues, but on the other hand, they're doing a good job to become carbon neutral. What are your thoughts?
Very good question. So in that study, we analyzed motorsport championships of all kinds. So Formula One, Formula Two, Formula Three, but also Formula E, which is the electric Formula One, or MotoGP, and so on. So we covered something like 150 motorsport championships, the major ones around the world. Formula E, the electric Formula One, ranked #1 in this ranking, and that wasn't a big surprise, to be honest. What made the news was Formula One ranking #2 in that ranking. I think, here we needed to appreciate that, of course, there are certain industries or certain business models that are more or less sustainable by definition. Okay, so when you look at the environmental performance of a bank, and you compare it with the environmental performance of an oil and gas company, the difference is there by definition. Okay, so there is going to be a different type of impact. But the reality is that we need both financial services and oil and gas at this stage, at least. So sustainability is not a blaming game. It's not about blaming the bad organizations. What we want, or is not about penalizing the wrong sectors. Sustainability is about pushing organizations in the right direction. So the idea is, it doesn't matter if you're in financial services or in oil and gas, you can probably reduce your environmental impact. You can probably improve your HR policies. You can improve the way you work or impact on local communities, so your social performance, and you can improve your governance, and so on. So the idea is that we want organizations to kind of draw a baseline today to assess what they do well, what they do less well, and basically to improve on that baseline. When you look at Formula One is an interesting case study, because we can agree or can disagree or discuss if that type of competition is sustainable or not. Okay, but let's for a moment work on the assumption that we do like Formula One and we want Formula One to remain there. We wanted to make sure that it is sustainable. This means that it is a responsible motorsport championship. So at that point, when you start looking at Formula One, in the last few years, they have made real investments, for example, to reduce their carbon footprint. They have made the real investments to better manage the events they run around the world to minimize the impact of these events. So they have basically secured, for example, certifications for sustainable event management. They have a strategy. This means that they are aware that they have got a carbon footprint, and they have a strategy to go net zero in the years coming. They have worked to improve the governance to make sure, for example, that there is diversity and gender balance in the management teams, and so on. So I think they demonstrated to have a strategy and to act, and that's why they did well in these rankings. I think there are problematic industries and business models that unfortunately are far from being sustainable. So think about the fast fashion. I do a lot of work in the fashion sector, and when you look at the business model of fast fashion, if your organizations are like, I don't know, H&M or Primark, is it possible that you will be a sustainable organization one day? I'm not sure. Because the problem is not the way you run a specific business, it's the business model per se. So I think sustainability is a very complex topic, but when we try to analyze the sustainability, at least at the corporate level, what we want is organizations to improve basically whatever they do, starting from a certain baseline. So we want organizations to be different organizations in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 15 years' time. We want them to take it seriously, and we want these organizations to be transparent about the problems they have and transparent about the progress they make on this journey.
Perfect, thank you. I know we're running close to time, so we've got 2 more questions. There's one that we'll get to if you have time to answer at least one more, Paolo, and then after that there's one that is in the Q&A box. It's quite long and complex, so I think it might be worthwhile you taking a read of that one rather than me reading it out.
I read it already, so I'm happy to answer it. So the triple bottom line is a framework suggesting that organizations should manage in a proactive way not only the economic performance, but also the environmental and social performance. The concept of creating shared value suggests this idea that companies should again, not only focus on economic performance, but at the same time develop products and services that help with the sustainable development of society. So, for example, if climate change is a big problem today, and unfortunately is, organizations that can contribute to address the changing climate, that can contribute to, for example, reduce carbon emissions, these organizations, they basically are organizations that are creating shared value and are going to be rewarded by the market. So one basically framework is pointing attention to 3 dimensions of performance. The second framework is suggesting this focus on economic value creation jointly with value for society.
Perfect, thank you. We have one more question in the Q&A box. I don't know if you could click that, Paolo, just to have a look. Should be down at the bottom of your screen. But they've mentioned a study and it's quite complex. I think the question itself, I'll let you read it, but I'll read it to the audience, is why do you think the strategies such as encouraging sufficiency, adopting a stewardship role, repurposing for society, etc., are left behind? And which barriers do you think organizations and social strategies face when considering business adoption?
Yeah. Okay, so this is, by the way, very good question from someone who is familiar with kind of this type of literature, and I guess the partially the answer to your question is in another study, an older study, which is a paper published by Boken, is one of the authors, Bocken, and other authors at Cambridge University. The name of the article is called the business. It's called the Business Model Archetypes for Industrial Sustainability, and basically is analyzing the different type of business models that organizations develop when they try to engage with sustainable transformation. And I think there are some really good insights in that paper that address some of the points you made in your comment. But let me say that more and more, I think we see examples in industry, organizations that, for example, try to adopt a stewardship role. I'm going to mention one simply because I recently published an article on them, which is Brunello Cucinelli. Is a luxury fashion company from Italy, and they are a really interesting organization to study. Definitely, a business model that is building on the idea of a stewardship role. So I think there are more and more examples. There is a real link between sustainability and innovation, and is also innovation of the business models. So we're going to see a lot of changes driven by sustainability in industry as a consequence of this topic becoming more widespread.